Who here on set is guilty of this? Amazon is cracking down on shoppers who return items too frequently, and in some cases, they're outright banning their worst offenders.
Wow.
A spokesperson for the online retailer confirms closing the accounts of users who abuse their 30-day return policy, but they won't specify just how many accounts they've closed. Kimberly,
Yeah,
wow.
Wow. Listen, they ain't closing mine down because it is a constant stream. It's like 30 items in the last hour. Amazon Prime.
She was at work, so it wasn't her.
Wasn't me. They don't take that excuse either. Reason for return. It wasn't me. Yeah, it doesn't work. But no, I really don't return because it's just so much effort.
Yes. You need a Peter.
Yeah,
to help you
that's the
return.
thing.
Yeah.
Where can I get my pizza? Pizza, pizza, wherefore art thou, pizza? Yeah.
I noticed this story this morning because it was the #1 story trending on the Wall Street Journal for like 2 days. And so I thought, what a first world problem to have, that you are so worried that you want to find out, like, well, am I going to get banned from Amazon for returning too much? I don't think I will. I don't think I will.
How often do you return, Dana?
I don't return all that much from Amazon, I don't think.
I think she has some low-level anxiety about it.
Yes, she does. She's afraid she's going to be banned.
I don't know what the metrics are.
I'm not banned for sure.
I only return things that don't feel right when I use them, like underwear and toothbrushes.
Yeah.
So I usually I box them up and I send them back with I have my own cellophane machine.
Deodorant too?
Deodorant as well. I think the percentage of returns has to be large compared to purchases. So if you're a constant cry, then that's it. I predict there will be a new service that returns things for you because we are now just a service culture. I have Seamless to deliver my food. I actually have another service that eats the food. I can't be bothered getting.
So, Greg, I think you should copyright that, like, today.
Yeah, return.
Well, there is one. It's
I
called
return.
TaskRabbit.
What?
That returns your items for you?
Well, yeah.
No, you like tasks.
Tasks. Like if you like, hey, can you help return this for me? And then they come and do it for you. But you have to pay.
They're a bunch of animals.
I just don't understand it. Is there a lot of money to be made in this industry of ordering and sending back? Otherwise,
No,
it's
I
just
think
a
Hey,
massive,
that's what the guy with no
massive
job
hassle.
from the previous blog.
Yeah.
That's what he could
I
do.
think he
could've
might
done
do
that
that.
for
Business
people.
idea.
But they don't want to say how many people that are doing this because it would be bad for their numbers and, you know, if you release this. And they'll be like,
what
whoa,
is it?
Amazon's
The
suffering.
returns can be as high as 15 to 30% of purchases. That's
Well,
unbelievable.
yeah, because
to me.
sometimes they send stuff that's broken. That has
They
happened.
do send stuff that's messed up. Like I ordered Ronin T-shirt, like little size, medium boys under T-shirts, and big boys ones came. So now I was had.
You didn't have to return it. I'm right here.
No, it would have been extra small for you, man. Yeah.
Listen, I just think
That's what I wear.
I think Amazon should just warn people before they close. Like right now, they're not warning people. Like warn before you close
you
my
know
account.
if you're an abuser.
I know. That's why
I
it's
got
the #1 story on Wall Street Journal.
Yes.
See, that's why Dana's nervous. I think she knows she's a return abuser.
Oh, but we're going to check with Peter.
We have to check on this one. Anyway, one more thing's up next. Don't go anywhere.
Well, it's time now for one more thing. Dana, what do you have?
Well, it's been a show, hasn't it?
No.
Let's top it off with this.
Indeed.
Dan Crenshaw, 33 years old, former Navy SEAL, won the Republican primary runoff election in Texas' 2nd Congressional District on Tuesday night. Although Crenshaw won in a landslide on Tuesday, Republican operatives following the race thought he did not have a chance. He's one of the guys that actually ran his district. I don't know if you remember that when I did that as a one more thing. These are all the people that he beat. He is going to win, I think, and it's pretty amazing. So congratulations to another veteran who is on his way to being a member of Congress.
All right, fantastic, great story, and also for following in the serving our country footsteps, Dana, a set of quadruplets, maybe you guys saw this story, in Michigan are now sharing another bond. And if you can believe it, they have all decided to enlist in the military after graduation. Bryce, Rose, Mason, and Nevin Lees of Western Michigan are joining 4 different branches.
Wow.
The high school senior is choosing Navy, Air Force, Air National Guard, and Marines. Siblings and their grandfather and brother-in-law inspired them to serve, and the sister Rose saying, quote, "Ever since I was little, I've always wanted to serve. I just want to help out our world." Now, can you imagine, and the juxtaposition of these 4 amazing siblings and the low life that's like sitting there scamming off his parents?
The 30-year-olds?
I can't. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
Very cool.
Greg.
All right, my podcast. You go to foxnewspodcast.com. It's with Dr. Drew. We talk about mental health issues. We talk about violence, and we talk about the opioid crisis. It's actually really entertaining, but with a lot of serious stuff, and I ain't kidding around, so check it out. And I also just tweeted it, so you can find it there. Meanwhile, it's time for Greg's Fox News. A lot of news in the Fox universe. This is upsetting. What has happened to Fox right now, what is being done to Fox is wrong. Take a look at this. Here is a fox that had just gotten a rabbit. He got his meal, right? That's his meal. He deserves that. He spent all day getting that. And then an eagle comes and says, no, I want the rabbit. And the fox has to fight for the rabbit. The eagle doesn't care. And, of course, the eagle lost the meal. So you don't mess with Fox is the bottom line, okay?
We always win.
Do not mess with Fox. We will take hold of the bunny and we won't let go because we're animals.
Are you like trying to say
Date will absolutely happen. It could very well be June 12th. We'll see. We'll know next week.
And late today, President Trump also weighed in on the NFL owners' decision to require players who are on the sidelines to stand for the national anthem. The president telling our Brian Kilmeade in an interview to air on Fox and Friends tomorrow that he is happy with the NFL's decision, but not particularly happy about the fact that the owners will give the players the opportunity, or at least the option, of riding out the national anthem in the locker room. Bret?
We'll story on that a little bit later, and maybe even the sound from the president from that interview. John, there is some reporting tonight that the White House is considering opening up that meeting to possibly Democrats as well. The classified intelligence briefing, maybe pushing it down a little bit further from this Thursday.
Chuck Schumer has been stating in the last 24 hours that he thinks that this should be handled by the so-called Gang of Eight leadership in Congress. There had not been any move toward that, but if this report is correct, Bret, there could be some move to get the Gang of Eight involved. So that would be in addition to Chairman Nunes and Chairman Gowdy. We'll run some traps on it, and we'll get back to you just as soon as we can.
John Roberts reporting from the White House. John, thanks. Major development tonight concerning presidential advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is in Washington to tell us what it is and why it's so important. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Bret, and good evening. Fox News confirms through multiple sources that the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner recently received his full security clearance. Late today, his lawyer said Kushner spoke to the special counsel, Robert Mueller, last month for 7 hours, addressing all topics, adding his clearance was handled by the book.
It happened in the normal course. It happened the way it happens for thousands of people. It goes to initially the Bureau, who does a background investigation. It takes a lot of time. It then gets traced through various agencies. It gets to the White House. There's a special office that does security measures. They're all career people. There was nobody in the political process.
Kushner had been working off an interim security clearance as he pursued foreign policy issues on behalf of the president. In February, the interim clearance was downgraded after Chief of Staff John Kelly issued new rules, and Kushner's security investigation had not been completed. With the Russia investigation looming over the White House, the clearance became a major media story.
Is Jared Kushner becoming a distraction given all the controversies that he's been at the center of in recent days?
Look, Jared's still a valued member of the administration, and he's going to continue to focus on the work that he's been doing, and we're going to continue pushing forward on that front as well.
A former intelligence community official and inspector general described the decision as a very significant one given the ongoing Mueller probe, because he said the matter would have been reviewed and approved at the highest levels of the FBI. The official said access to classified materials, no matter what level of clearance, would only happen if there were no outstanding counterintelligence concerns. Bret.
More on this with the panel. Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the Trump administration will not tolerate Russian interference in this fall's elections. Pompeo made the promise to a congressional hearing today. He did not say what the president might do about it. His testimony was interrupted briefly today over a totally unrelated matter. Correspondent Rich Edson has the story from the State Department tonight.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was there to answer questions about the State Department's budget. But this hearing got testy over another issue, his questioning of Hillary Clinton during a 2015 Benghazi hearing when he was still a member of Congress.
I take diplomatic security very serious, never make an accusation.
I happen to agree with that. Oh, now the real secretary is coming out.
If I could just
explain.
My time.
Okay, we're going to give you time, but we want to give the Secretary a chance to respond.
He didn't do that with Secretary. He did not do that with Secretary Clinton. Let me tell you that.
Testifying before the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Secretary Pompeo also addressed how the Venezuelan government notified the State Department this morning that it is ejecting 2 American diplomats. That's in response to U.S. sanctions on Venezuela after its president, Nicolas Maduro, won re-election. The U.S. considers that election a sham. On Russia, Pompeo contends the Trump administration has aggressively punished its behavior, though acknowledges officials must do more.
We have not been able to achieve deterrence, effective deterrence of some of these efforts of the Russians, but this administration has taken enormous efforts to push back against Russia that haven't been done in an awfully long time.
He says the administration will implement, quote, appropriate countermeasures against Russian interference. After the more than 3-hour hearing, Pompeo hosted officials from Japan, Germany, and China. Pompeo says the State Department is sending a medical team to Guangzhou, China, after a U.S. employee reported symptoms that are very similar to those 24 American diplomats in Cuba experienced.
We've notified China of what took place as best we know it, and they have responded in a way that is exactly the right response.
Pompeo also discussed with China's foreign minister the upcoming summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. He says officials here at the State Department are still planning and driving for a June 12th meeting. He also notes the United States will not give any concessions to North Korea until it has credible information, credible demonstration that it's dismantling its nuclear program. Bret?
And speaking of concessions, Rich, Iran is now making demands of Europe on this nuclear deal?
It is. Just posted a short while ago, the European countries and those remaining in the Iran nuclear deal are negotiating with Iran, trying to keep it in the Iran nuclear agreement to salvage the deal. Well, now Iran has just posted a list of demands of the European allies, Britain, Germany, and France. The Ayatollah Khomeini wants them to fully guarantee Iranian oil sales, safeguard Iran's trade against U.S. sanctions, and leave its ballistic missile program and regional policies alone. The Ayatollah says that's the price for keeping Iran in the nuclear deal. Iran is now putting the Europeans between the United States and Iran. That's because Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced Monday 12 demands of Iran, saying it's going to put the strongest sanctions in history against it if it doesn't comply with those U.S. demands. Right.
Check it out. Rich Edson at the State Department. Rich, thank you. We will soon find out if North Korea is serious about dismantling its main nuclear weapons testing site. A group of journalists is on its way to the remote location right now. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott reports this evening from Seoul, South Korea.
The Korean peninsula could be moving a step closer to peace in the coming hours. A North Korean official confirmed the regime is ready to dismantle via an explosive closure its nuclear test site in the northeastern part of the country as early as Thursday local time. South Korean journalists on Wednesday joined a small group of regime-picked international reporters on their way by train to record the event. No international observers have been invited by the regime of Kim Jong-un, and many analysts say the site is unusable now anyway. But it does have symbolic value.
Closing the test site is a goodwill gesture. It's got some substance to it, but, you know, it's not the whole shebang.
In fact, all of this comes ahead of the summit involving Kim Jong-un and President Trump planned for June 12th in Singapore. Fresh from their own summit last month with Kim Jong-un and yesterday's session with President Trump, an aide to South Korean President Moon Jae-in told Fox News the meeting should proceed, and rhetoric is natural, saying fine-tuning and adjusting the scope of expectations is required for the scheduled summit. If it does go ahead, it will be Kim Jong-un's 4th recent summit. Some think even if he's not willing to commit to complete denuclearization, he could come close.
I think that they will surrender a significant part of their nuclear weapons, and if American negotiators are skillful and tough enough, they can squeeze a lot from North Korea right now, but not everything.
But all here agree there is a way to go to get to that point and beyond, starting with the dismantling of that nuclear site, set to blow in just a few hours. Bret.
Greg Palcott in Seoul, South Korea. Greg, thanks. We are getting new images tonight of the dangerous but strikingly beautiful scene in Hawaii as the Kilauea volcano eruptions continue. Correspondent Jeff Paul is on the Big Island tonight. Jeff?
Bret, we are just a few hundred yards away from two very active fissures that right now are exploding behind us. clashing together now. This is what scientists are worried about. As you can tell, we're standing in a residential area. This road went through a house on the other side. And what's incredible about that is that this ago was able to pass on. You were able to drive on this. And so this lava is starting to move faster. It's growing in size. It's very unpredictable. And for where we're standing, just a half a mile away, that's that geothermal plant that so many right now are concerned about. If that lava were to reach there, it's about 300 yards away from the well pad. There could be explosions. There could be releases of toxic steam. So right now, we just passed a few geologists in here. They're monitoring it. This path is growing farther and farther up the road. There's a house over here to the next to us right here, and the Hawaii National Guard telling us that within 24 hours, this house right here will likely be covered with lava. Bret?
Jeff Paul, an amazing sight just over your shoulder there. Thank you. Reporting live from Hawaii. We'll check in as that develops. Up next from Los Angeles, we dive into the California governor's race and update the primaries from last night. Welcome back to Los Angeles. Looking at the primaries last night, Atlanta lawyer Stacey Abrams will try to become the first female black governor in U.S. history this fall. She won the Georgia Democratic primary last night. She will face either Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle or Secretary of State Brian Kemp. Those Republicans will engage in a July runoff. Democrats in Central Kentucky nominated a retired Marine fighter pilot, Amy McGrath, over Lexington Mayor Jim Gray to take on incumbent Republican Congressman Andy Barr in the fall. And in Arkansas, cancer survivor Clark Tucker won the Democratic nomination for a House seat. He'll face incumbent Republican French Hill, a noted Obamacare opponent. Just some of the results last night. Here in California, we're going to focus on the politics in the nation's most populous state. In a moment, I'll talk with California Republican gubernatorial candidate John Cox. But first, Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt tells us why the top Democrat in the race may actually support the top Republican in this primary.
It takes courage to make real change. That's Gavin Newsom.
Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom holds a comfortable lead in the gubernatorial race going into the June 5th primary, which, under California's system, will send the top two vote-getters into November's runoff, regardless of party affiliation.
President Obama called him one of America's finest mayors.
The race for the second general election spot appears to be between former LA Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, who has not been formally endorsed by President Obama, but whose backers know an association will play well with Democrats in California, and Republican John Cox, a San Diego businessman whom President Trump recently endorsed via tweet, saying, "John Cox is the man. He'll be the best governor you've ever had." The latest poll has Villaraigosa and Cox in a statistical dead heat, with Newsom comfortably ahead, but also with 39% of voters apparently undecided.
Taking thousands in illegal gifts from special interests.
If his ads are anything to go by, attacking Villaraigosa while emphasizing Cox's conservative credentials for Republican voters,
John Cox stands with Donald Trump and the NRA.
Newsom would seem to prefer to face a conservative Republican than a fellow Democrat in the final vote.
The Villaraigosa campaign describes Newsom's approach as cynical and says he will, quote, do just about anything to get elected, including selling out his own Democratic Party. For Newsom himself, the calculation seems fairly simple, Bret. Defeating a Republican in the general election here in what is still largely liberal California will be easier than taking on another Democrat.
It's an interesting race, and obviously the general is a different picture than the primary. Jonathan, thank you.
Sure.
Earlier today, I spoke with John Cox, who hopes to first make it on the ballot in November and then upset the favorite Democrat Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom. I began by asking about the key issues in this race.
There's two key issues. There's the sanctuary state law, which the politicians in Sacramento have passed, and the public is up in arms about because it protects criminal, illegal aliens instead of trying to protect law-abiding citizens and the population. The other big issue is the gas tax and the crushing tax burden in California. Instead of actually doing something about the waste and corruption in Caltrans, which spends 4 times what Texas does to build roads. The politicians passed a huge new gas tax. Gasoline in the state's already over $4 a gallon, and it's going to $5 a gallon by the end of the year. It's a regressive tax, and it's crushing working people in the state.
The top two Democrats, and really you're fighting for one of the top two spots, on the issue of immigration at a debate earlier this month, said this.
I think we need to acknowledge that the Dreamers didn't come here on their own, and we've got to say that they've got a right to have a legalized status.
One thing I'm going to do is push back against John Cox, Travis Allen, and Donald Trump and Trumpism. This is the kind of, rhetoric that has no place in California.
Now, you can hear the cheers there. What do you say to people who question whether, if you get to one of the top two spots, that you can actually pull off a Republican win in California?
Well, Bret, I'm a Jack Kemp Republican. I served on his presidential steering committee in 1987, and Jack always celebrated legal immigration. And I think what we're talking about here is illegal immigration. But more importantly, the sanctuary state law is about criminals who are held by law enforcement and MS-13 gang members, for example, and then they're being released into the population without informing ICE. And I think the public is outraged about that. If somebody who's committed a crime is in the hands of law enforcement, I want ICE informed. I want that person deported. The Democrats are trying to make this about racism. They're trying to make this about immigration in general, and I want immigration to this country. I celebrate the idea that this country is the beacon of hope for the world, but I don't want people cutting in line. I want people coming to this country legally. I think we need to streamline that process. We need a growing economy, and you get that with more people contributing to the economy. So I totally favor what the president's talking about, an end to chain migration, improvement of the opportunity of people who can come to this country and help us grow this nation and make it make it continue to be the greatest country in the world.
Last thing, for people around the nation, the lieutenant governor there at the end, you heard him say, I'm going to fight John Cox and Donald Trump, and the cheers. In reality, because of the politics of this jungle primary, Gavin Newsom is really kind of supporting you in a way now, isn't he?
Well, he'd like to run against me, but, Hillary wanted to run against President Trump, too, and we know how that turned out. President Trump is a businessman. He's endorsed me because I'm a businessman. And, Bret, business people look for solutions. That's what the president's doing. He's trying to solve the immigration problem, and he's delivering results for the American people. I intend, as a businessman, to deliver results for the people of California, make this state affordable, make it open for business, fix our roads, fix our schools, fix our water system, make this state affordable and sustainable and livable for the working people of this state. And, Mr. Newsom is a politician from the word go. He's a Bay Area elitist. He's going to be more of the same, more Jerry Brown, big government, more taxes, and a crushing affordability problem. We just can't continue down that road. We're going to get a lot of change in 2018.
Mr. Cox, we appreciate your time. We'll follow this race closely.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Bret. Thanks for the opportunity.
When we come back, is Prime Minister an entry-level job in Italy? Apparently so. Overseas politics now. A little-known political novice is tonight preparing to form a coalition government in Italy. But there are some concerns about the prospective premier's past. Here's senior foreign affairs correspondent Amy Kellogg.
Italy's president has approved the appointment of this man as prime minister, attorney Giuseppe Conte, a total political outsider.
I put myself forth to be the defense attorney for the Italian people.
Now Conte has to put together a government which will need final approval by the Italian president and parliament. It will be Europe's first populist government, a coalition between the far-right League and the anti-establishment Five-Star Movement, whose leaders chose this unlikely political novice to steer the ship.
He is a self-made man. He's a tough person in our country. He fought for respect of the law and respect of moral rules.
But Conte is already facing allegations of dishonesty. He claims to have perfected his legal studies at New York University. NYU officials said they have no record of study, but said he was granted permission to conduct research at the law library. Despite backtracking on earlier talk of ditching the euro, this new team has roiled the markets and raised concerns in the EU. Its program could be quite radical. Disdain for the euro, sending back hundreds of thousands of migrants and giving everyone a minimum basic income. The leader of Italy's far-right league, Matteo Salvini, says Europe is getting worked up over nothing. But he used his most famous term, perhaps borrowed from President Trump.
Obviously, we want a government, as we said in our campaigns, that will put the Italian national interest at the centre, respecting everyone and everything, but putting Italy at the centre. Italians first.
The other thing the new team would like to do is drop sanctions against Russia. Italy, which has had more than 60 governments since World War II, has a certain admiration for strongman Vladimir Putin. Bret.
Amy Kellogg in London. Amy, thank you. Back here in the U.S., as John Roberts referenced earlier, National Football League players will be required to stand for the national anthem this coming season if they choose to come onto the field. A new NFL rule gives players the option of staying in the locker room, but players are still not happy. Correspondent Dan Springer is live in Seattle with reaction. Good evening, Dan.
Yeah, good evening, Brett. The players who have reacted oppose the new policy, saying it's never been about the national anthem. But over the last 2 years, it has become a debate over patriotism, the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's one the NFL just wants to end. So the new policy says players no longer have to be on the field for the playing of the Star-Spangled Banner. They can stay in the locker room. But if they are on the field, they must stand. And if they don't, their team will be fined.
We want people to be respectful of the national anthem. We want people to stand. That's all personnel, and make sure that they treat this moment in a respectful fashion.
The controversy began in 2016 with Colin Kaepernick sitting on the bench during the anthem to protest the treatment of young black men by police, but it quickly spread to virtually all the teams. President Trump got involved, calling on owners to fire their players who kneel and for his supporters to boycott the NFL. Vice President Pence even got up and left a game in his home state when some players took a knee during the anthem. Some team owners were upset, but the league initially backed the players' right to protest in this way. But according to Nielsen, a lot of fans turned away. Ratings were down over 9% last season, and with revenue of $14 billion a year, there is a lot at stake. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker says the new policy is wrong.
It is an affront to the ideals that I hold dear, to a league that should be doing everything they can to represent those ideals that we all share.
The Players Union is also against the change, issuing a statement today saying NFL players have shown their patriotism through their social activism, their community service, in support of our military and law enforcement, and yes, through their protest to raise awareness about issues they care about. Some will say the league punted the league owners because it's now up to the individual teams to discipline players who violate the policy. And one owner today, Christopher Johnson of the New York Jets, says he will pay the fines and not punish the players who continue to protest on the field. Bret?
Dan Springer, live in Seattle. Dan, thanks. A judge, meantime, says President Trump is violating the First Amendment when he blocks critics on Twitter. But the judge is stopping short of ordering the president to stop that practice. It has been suggested the president mute and not block some of the critics. Muting prevents the user from seeing that person's tweets and reply messages. Markets today, stocks are up. The Dow gained 52. The S&P 500 finished ahead 9. The Nasdaq jumped 47.5. Up next, the panel on President Trump's accusations against what he calls the criminal deep state.
We now call it Spygate. You're calling it Spygate. A lot of bad things have happened. I want them all to get together. They'll sit in a room. Hopefully they'll be able to work it out among themselves. We're not undercutting. We're cleaning everything up. What I want is total transparency.
Any meeting between the Justice Department and Capitol Hill about such information should only be attended by members of the Gang of Eight.
I don't care who comes. I'm not in control of the invite list.
Well, this meeting is going forward. We mentioned it earlier with John Roberts. The meeting tomorrow will include the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, the House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy, the FBI Director, the National Intelligence Director, and the Acting Principal Deputy Attorney General. All of those will be at this meeting at the DOJ about the classified elements of this investigation. But we're being told that there will likely be another meeting with the Gang of Eight, the bipartisan leadership of Congress, possibly after the Memorial Day recess. We'll start there with all this investigation of the investigation and bring in the panel. Joining me here in Los Angeles, Steve Hilton, former advisor to British Prime Minister David Cameron and host of The Next Revolution here on Fox News, and Leslie Marshall, syndicated talk radio host, and in Washington, Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and Matthew Continetti, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon. Steve, let me start with you. Your thoughts on how this is all coming out and the significance of it.
Well, Bret, it wasn't that long ago that the left and parts of the establishment media, I'm thinking in particular the New York Times, were deeply suspicious of what we now describe as the deep state. When we had James Clapper going to Congress and lying about surveilling the American people, there's this suspicion of the security services and the intelligence agencies. And now that they seem to be against Trump, we're supposed to believe that they're purer than pure, everything that they say is gospel, and there's no grounds for any suspicion. I think there's no question that there are sufficient reasons to think that the establishment in the government bureaucracy thought that the prospect of a Trump presidency was unthinkable, unacceptable, and took steps to try and stop it. There's enough suspicion there to think that we really do need a thorough investigation that's equivalent to the investigation in Russia meddling, which is really important, to look at the potential of deep state meddling.
Mara, I don't know. Are you calling it Spygate? Who's calling it Spygate?
I'm not, but the president is very happy, it sounds, that he's branded something new. He is a super brander, and he's come up with Spygate, and as he said today, you're calling it Spygate, I'm calling it Spygate, everyone's talking about this. He said it could be the biggest scandal in American history. What he's talking about, according to his tweets, is that there was someone, a spy, as he calls it, embedded in his campaign for political purposes to spy on the campaign. So far, there's no evidence of that. We don't know if he's talking about an FBI informant who met with certain members of the campaign, reached out to them to find out what contacts they had with Russians. But if the president wanted to, he can declassify any piece of information he wants. He could have asked any of his intelligence officials over the last couple of weeks or months to say, hey, tell me what you know. Was there a spy embedded in my campaign? I don't think he wants to know. I think he wants to keep this story going. This is a good narrative for him, and it helps him undermine the credibility of the investigations into him and his campaign.
Yeah, I want to talk about another development, Leslie, and that is the Jared Kushner getting security clearance today, finally, after a long period of time. A national security law attorney, former FBI agent, told us, quote, this is a very significant development. The Bureau would have had very senior people on this, and the matter would have been reviewed and approved at the most senior levels. Given all the circumstances, this decision would be highly vetted and considered. They wouldn't be deeming him eligible for access to classified materials, no matter what level of the clearance, if there were any outstanding counterintelligence concerns whatsoever. Again, a very significant development. One person's assessment of this. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think that Jared Kushner is the problem. I think the president and his rhetoric are the problem. And I think that's caused a problem not only for his son-in-law, but the tensions that we have seen with the rhetoric toward the FBI and other law enforcement agencies that are supposed to be working for our country and for the Constitution and have their loyalty there. When we go back to Mara's point, you know, when you call this Spygate, and I know I'm not calling it Spygate, okay? I just want to go on the record there.
And I don't think we've called it Spygate. I'm pretty sure.
I'll
bet you in a couple of weeks you well, that's the way it goes.
Let's just speak about Spygate, if we will. The role of the FBI and anybody, even if they've worked for a Republican president, if it is this gentleman all the way back to Ronald Reagan, is to do exactly this, is to say, hey, wait a minute, there have been some conversations between Russia and those in the United States. Paul Manafort has been indicted. Paul Manafort is one of the people that was spoken to. And to Mara's point, the president certainly has the power power to find out if there was a spy embedded, if there truly was Spygate. This is deflection. Why deflect from the Mueller special counsel investigation if there's nothing to hide, if there's no there there?
Both things are going forward, and we always say we don't know what we don't know, but we're covering both sides. The reason I bring up the Jared Kushner thing is how that was covered early on in this process suggested that because of all his foreign contacts and all of this, the questions that were raised about Jared Kushner, that there was no way he was going to get security clearance and somehow he could be charged or indicted. That was the coverage and the speculation. Now he's cleared.
Right, and as one former official told Catherine Herridge in her report, Bret, that would imply that those counterintelligence concerns no longer exist if he has been granted this security coverage. I like to quote Donald Rumsfeld. There are so many known unknowns about now the investigation into Russian interference and also the investigation of the investigation, which is really, let's remember, coming from Congress. As much as Donald Trump is publicizing it and, in fact, aiding it, there are a lot of concerns from the House Intelligence Committee about how did this start. And I think that's one of the great known unknowns, rather, is when did this investigation open? What was in the original order that Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein gave to Robert Mueller? We still don't know the full details of that. We also don't know about this other British or semi-British professor, Mifsud, who met with George Papadopoulos. He hasn't been seen in public in months. So the known unknowns continue to mount.
Mara, where do you think this goes and how fast do you think it comes to resolution?
I really don't know. We know what Rudy Giuliani says about it, that he'll be done by September. Mueller will be done by September. The problem with covering this is that every little twist and turn, we don't know the big picture. Bob Mueller isn't talking, to his credit. So we're covering this through a straw, and everything seems like the biggest deal. I just would say the bottom line to me for today for Jared Kushner, this was a good day for Jared Kushner, and it was a good week for Jared Kushner because he started working on a substantive policy that has bipartisan support in Congress, and that's prison reform.
Well, that's exactly right. And we'll be following that as it makes its way. It's already passed the House and now headed to the Senate. All right. Tomorrow we will have the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, on this show, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be hosting tomorrow from Dallas. Next up, the president's top diplomat on China, North Korea, and Iran.
I take diplomatic security very serious. Never make an accusation.
I happen to agree with that. Oh, now the real secretary is coming out.
If I could just explain. Okay, we're going to give you time, but we want to give the secretary a chance to respond.
He didn't do that with Secretary. He did not do that with Secretary Clinton. Let me tell you that.
Well, that was one of the heated moments in the testimony today, talking there about the Benghazi hearing and the new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. He also talked about Russian interference and the possibility ahead of the midterms.
We have not been able to achieve deterrence, effective deterrence of some of these efforts of the Russians, but this administration has taken enormous efforts to push back against Russia that haven't been done in an awfully long time. No responsible government official would ever state that they believe they've done enough to forestall any attack on the United States of America.
We're back with the panel. Mara, Secretary Pompeo has a full plate here with all of the foreign policy challenges he's facing. Your thoughts on the hearing today?
Yeah, I thought that he was pretty skillful. He's a politician. He's been elected. He's gone before voters. The difference between him and Rex Tillerson is vast. And you can just see he's so much more at ease in these situations. He's got a lot on his plate, as you said. He's got North Korea. He's got Iran. He's got State Department morale, which is pretty low. But he's working hard to improve that. And what he just said about the government needs to do more to harden its election and ballot infrastructure against possible Russian threats for the November elections is important. And we'll see how they follow that up.
Steve, the real question is about North Korea and whether this summit moves forward June 12th. What's your sense as you look at the tea leaves here?
It feels as if it's going to go ahead. It feels like there's a lot of dancing going on. Both sides trying to make it clear that they're not being played by the other. I think that's what you'd expect. But remember, it's an extraordinary situation that we're in, that we're even talking about this happening. That itself is progress. And I think the most important thing to bear in mind is that all of this is better than the alternative, than where we were a few months ago, a couple of years ago, when there was such a frightening prospect of a nuclear attack from North Korea. The fact that we're even in a conversation is good, and that's still true even if they have the summit and not much comes out of it other than they agree to keep talking.
Matthew, when we get to Iran and the issue of pulling out of the nuclear agreement, now you have the Ayatollah coming forward with stipulations for the EU to stay in the nuclear deal. Among them, leave our ballistic missiles alone.
This comes as the New York Times is reporting, Bret, that there is evidence now of Iranian missile testing in kind of the rural areas of Iran. And again, a clear violation of the spirit of the agreement which the United States pulled out of. I think the mullah's attempt to intimidate the Europeans is probably going to backfire, and it's also misplaced. The real decision making that needs to take place now is in Washington, D.C., and that is are we going to really levy the full secondary sanctions against European companies that do continue to do business with Iran as a result of the sanctions? Another decision that Secretary Pompeo, and also I'd add, I thought it was an interesting photo of the meeting with President Moon of South Korea, that right next to Secretary Pompeo was National Security Advisor John Bolton, who clearly, I think, is having a very expansive role in all of these internal debates.
Leslie, I saw you shaking your head about the North Korea summit. Here's the president the other day when asked about whether it's going forward or not.
June 12th, are you going to be in Singapore?
We'll see what happens. I mean, right now we're looking at it. We're talking about it. They're talking to us. We have certain conditions. We'll see what happens. But there's a good chance. I know it would be a great thing for North Korea. If that happens, it'll be a great thing for North Korea. Most importantly, it would be a great thing for the world. So we'll see what happens.
Right.
That's with Brian Kilmeade today. That interview airing tomorrow morning on Fox and Friends. He sounded less enthusiastic about the prospects earlier in the week, but seems to say that there's still a chance.
There is a chance. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, on June 12th, I just don't. And I think the fact that, you see this coin and all of a sudden the tough talk with China, that changes, and China definitely is a part of this.
You mean the coin that they minted for the summit itself?
Yes. When we look historically at this country and this family and this leader, his father and his grandfather, we've been here before, Bret. We have had promises, we've had meetings, we've had promises of meetings. And at the end of the day, nothing ends up materializing. And I think it's interesting that we have a president that's a Republican and a Republican Party who poo-pooed Democrats like Barack Obama and Bill Clinton with regard to diplomacy or sanctions with North Korea. And they're doing the same thing that, quite frankly, both Democrats and Republicans have done for the past 50 years.
You've never had the pressure, the concerted pressure from the US and China that's been applied on North Korea that's actually got them to the point of even considering meeting. That is the new development.
I agree with you there. And this is something that's not left or right. I mean, I'm not a fan of the president. I didn't vote for him. But, we want world peace. We want to denuclearize North Korea. Will these talks happen? And if they happen, will it lead to that? I'm not sure. This is not a man that can be trusted. I'm not talking about the president. I'm talking about Kim Jong-un.
Mara.
Yeah, I think that the president and maybe Kim are both invested in having this meeting happen at some point. But there was a sense that the president was so eager for this that he wasn't willing to kind of go through all the prep that was necessary, really find out what North Korea meant by denuclearization. It sounds like they mean something different than what the president means. And we don't know what concessions the president wants North Korea to make before they get investment from the U.S., the kinds of things that he's been saying will make North Korea very happy and very rich.
We will see. We'll follow all elements of it. Panel, thank you from L.A. and D.C. When we come back, an interesting take on the royal wedding.